Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks. Second day of our annual All Hands for the Midwest Big Data Hub. We will be starting the program at 9 a.m. this morning. So we'll move forward. We'll start at 9. Look forward to talking with you then. Thank you. Good morning and welcome back. I think we'll get started now. Thank you. I think it's great to see everybody. We've got at least 14 states represented here at the All Hands meeting. Want to just say again, many thanks to Case Western Reserve University for hosting us here at our annual All Hands meeting. I'll make some comments at the end of the morning as well, but two quick things here. We've left evaluation sheets on your tables. Please fill those out. That helps us with planning for the next meeting, and also helps us identify opportunities to make some things or manage some things differently. So thank you for that. I also need to thank the co-chairs of the poster session from last night. Arya Farahi and Val Penchev helped us organize the student panel session, the student poster session, so thank you very much for that. I'll make some more, I'll thank our other sponsors as we close the meeting today, but I would like to now introduce Dr. Alejandro Suarez. He's the Assistant Program Director for the Big Data Hubs program and supports large cooperative agreements within the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure at the National Science Foundation. And he's going to talk to us about some of the NSF programs that are of interest to us today. Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having me here. All right, so I sort of split my discussion a little bit since I will also be on the panel immediately after this in terms of other funding opportunities. So I'm going to focus a little bit on the Hubs ecosystem here, but also connecting a little bit to some NSF initiatives. So as Melissa described yesterday, we have our, we're in the Midwest here, one of the 4 regional big data innovation hubs. Many of you know how we're situated amongst the 4 regions of the U.S. Just a little bit of history. This is we're getting to the end of the 3rd year of the Hubs program, of the current hubs. So they established themselves, to do regional as well as some national initiatives, working on issues of shared interest, accelerating ideation, this sort of collection for shared and technical organization resources, and fostering training. So I'm also glad to see a lot of students here at this meeting yesterday and today. The cross-regional activities are something that I'll also talk about, how hubs have been able to work together to push forward some national scale efforts. So the year after we started the hubs, we established the BD Spokes activities. So these were these more targeted kind of data-driven areas that we heard some feedback from several of Spoke members yesterday, and we have some new ones that I'll describe in just a second here, but these are just really quickly some of the areas that have been impacted by the Spoke activities in the 2 years that we've run the Spokes solicitation. In the most recent, so over the summer, we awarded a wide variety of new spokes across the 4 big data hubs, as well as some other national scale efforts, some eager grants. So within the Midwest, of course, we have 3 new spokes that we funded, and I think there's some members of at least 2 of the spokes at this meeting. We also funded the Open Storage Network, which I know we have some members of that community that had a poster yesterday and have been doing some ongoing discussions with all of the hubs as part of this national effort. So I won't read this all word for word, but these slides I believe should be available, so you can go to the links in these slides if you want more specific information about these projects. Within the Midwest spokes, so we have this community-driven data engineering for substance abuse prevention in the rural Midwest, this opioid abuse targeted spoke. We have this water quality issues in the Upper Mississippi River Delta spoke. So this was looking at how to impact both the water quality within this hydrological context. I know there was this, there's things beyond me in terms of understanding nitrogen cycles better within these river deltas, which was very interesting. And also looking at transportation, sort of bridge infrastructure, which I know we have several members of that team here today if you want more information about that activity. So what I wanted to focus on a little bit today was sort of talking about what the hubs are looking like moving forward. So right now, as I said, we're at the third year of the current hubs, which were 3-year awards. So they've been acting as these connected hubs of activity. They've been catalyzing some great new research activities as well as providing economic and social good. They've been responding, I think, to a lot of interesting opportunities with as quickly as the big data field has been progressing, or data science, however you want to define the discipline, has been progressing. I think the agility of the hubs have really been great to respond to these changes. And the innovative programming that each hub has been able to cater to a specific regional need, I think, has also been very important. And of course, I just talked about how the BD spokes were able to focus these mission activities a little bit into specific areas of regional interest and have some actual, some goals, some deliverables, some metrics to work with. And of course, through all of this, data science and big data has continued to expand and to evolve. So one of the things that has been announced since the initiation of the hubs were the 10 big ideas from the National Science Foundation. So these are 6 research and 4 process ideas that our director, Franz Cordova, announced, I believe, in 2016, to really push forward some really targeted initiatives in different areas of the foundation and towards different research communities, as well as understanding the process of how awards are made, how awards are carried out, and how researchers can work in more interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary fashion. So one of these big ideas, which I think is of great interest to the community here, is harnessing the data revolution. So the harnessing the data revolution big idea is really meant to promote engagement of NSF's research community in the pursuit of this fundamental research in data science and engineering. I think there's also the connection with making teams that are able to be agile enough and interdisciplinary enough to be able to act on the new interesting challenges that data science and big data can really attack, can really solve. So this coordinated vision is something that I wanted to really push, that the NSF BD Hubs program is aligned within this HDR big idea. So connected to that, many of you have probably seen that we have a new solicitation on the street for the next phase of the big data hubs. So like I said before, the original hubs were 3-year awards, so we're nearing the end of year 3. And in this new solicitation, we first off want to ensure that we're communicating that we're committed to continued success of this BD Hubs ecosystem, and we want the BD Hubs to continue to nucleate these regional collaborations, these multi-sector projects, and continue to foster innovation in data science. So the main goals of this solicitation is to reaffirm this commitment to 4 regional BD Hubs in the 4 regions of the US, continue to commit to this network, this ecosystem of stakeholders, resources, and activities that have been built up, and catalyze new research so that we can continue to make that impact on societal and economic good for the nation. And we want to keep that regional orientation along with the connection to national impact as well. But in the end, each hub will be primarily in service to a region of the country. And I think one of the greatest strengths of the BD Hubs themselves is to serve as this incubator, to be able to bring communities together that may not always have a chance to be in the same room with each other, just like meetings just like this, where new ideas can be fostered and new activities, new proposals, new projects can really come out of that. So there are three main activities that we laid out as examples of what we'd be looking for in the next phase of the BD Hubs. We see programmatic activities. This is sort of these ideation kind of activities, transformative initiatives, sort of this kind of programming work. Socio-technical and shared resources and services. So understanding the sort of some central repository of knowledge, so to speak. And when I say repository, I don't mean that literal data kind of repository, but be able to be a meeting place or a go-to for research communities to be able to connect with other communities that may enter into mutually beneficial relationships. And this connects obviously with brokering partnerships that can stimulate innovation in data science. And then sort of equal to these top two is this data science education and workforce development piece. So this is really responding to the specific regional needs that the different regions of the country will have to education, workforce, and training needs. Student internships, these are just sort of some examples of possible activities. Having really students connect with what different career paths look like in the data sciences, I think is really important. And those career paths may not only involve going to PhD programs, it may not only involve going to Google, it may not only involve going to, you know, the R1 faculty track in whatever research discipline that student is in. There's a wide breadth and there's a lot of switching of tracks that I know students have done, that I have done over the course of their careers. And I think having a forum for broadening participation as well in data science is incredibly important. So NSF is very committed to broadening participation. The Computer Science Directorate itself, I don't have a slide on this, but we recently announced a new broadening participation initiative asking for more detailed plans on what broadening participation efforts computer scientists will be making as part of their research projects. And I think with the BD Hubs, it's incredibly important to ensure that data science, being the rather new field that it is, can be as inclusive as possible to all different communities that are able to make substantive impacts intellectually as well as societally, and connecting to the needs of all these different groups as well. So in addition to the regional activities that we're looking to see from the next phase of the hubs, we wanted to see a lightweight national entity that can serve as, in some sense, a national representation of what the BD Hubs have to offer. I think the hubs themselves on a regional level have been incredibly successful in terms of, you know, you want to interface with the hubs, you have a place to go for your region, you have people that you can talk to figure out how you can be involved. We wanted to expand that so that folks that aren't even sure what region they want to connect to, or if several regions want to work together for a national scale initiative or national scale project or some kind of national scale challenge, that they have that framework to be able to do that kind of effort. And I think a lot of that has already been done in a bit more of an ad hoc fashion and has been very successful in the current iteration of the hubs. We just want to formalize that just a little bit. And I think that's pretty much what I discussed. So the collective impact is also very important. I again want to talk about how this alignment with the big data, harnessing the data revolution idea is really connected to what the hubs have to offer. One thing that is new in this solicitation, in addition to the steering committee that we've talked about and has been involved in the current iteration of the hubs, is that moving forward, each hub will have a seed fund that will be able to have on a competitive basis through interactions with their steering committee, a way to award some small planning kind of level activities. And this is, I think this is worth spending a little bit of time on, because I'm sure many of you may be looking and say, oh, well, we already have, if we already have a hub, or we don't feel like we are expecting to compete with the hub, what does this have to do with my project? I think this is where many of you, no matter what level of connection you have to a hub, may find interesting. Just to give a little bit of background, sort of how things are set up right now, which I think has been very successful, is that the BD Hub activities sort of work with contributors, beneficiaries amongst nonprofits, industries, government, and academia. And then spokes have been proposed, awarded by NSF, other new initiatives have been started, other new projects have been started, and I really should put a few small dotted lines in between sort of the spoke activities and the hub activities. What we want to do is formalize that a little bit more and ensure that community input is heard a little bit more in the form of this seed fund. So the seed fund is something that the coordinators of the BD Hub are able to work directly with that community input to be able to understand what are initiatives, new projects, new types of collaborations, initiatives that the community itself is really behind. And through that seed fund, that feeds into what new sort of initiatives or research projects and other kinds of activities that are proposed really comes from. So just a little bit of more administrative details. So these would be $4 million awards, up to 4 years duration. So I just talked about how the previous version of the hubs were 3 years in duration. So this expands the hubs a little bit, again, to ensure the continuity, sustainability of these hubs. And we do have a note on eligibility criteria for proposers of the next phase of the hubs. Again, to maintain continuity from successes that the current version of the hubs have been carrying out, is that at least one PI or co-PI of a proposal submitted to the solicitation must be a PI, co-PI, or senior personnel on one of the 4 currently funded BD hubs. So that allows for this connection of and institutional knowledge transfer that can take place. And of course, throughout all of this, I've been giving this BD Hub queries at nsf.gov email address. So this goes directly to myself and Beth Playley, my colleague, who is also working with the BD Hubs program. Beth actually ran a recent webinar just a couple of weeks ago where she went over a lot of this information, but also had a bit more Q&A with some of the attendees of that webinar. You can go to this address here if you want more information about that. I know the slides will be available, but I tried to make URLs as short as possible. Those are case-sensitive URLs if you need to copy something down right now. And I also wanted to just give out my, my email if you have any specific questions to my talk here, or Beth's email if you have any specific questions for my colleague, Beth Playley. Again, I have the BD Hub solicitation email address here. I ran out of time last night, but I really wanted to take this picture and take the little visualization piece and try to expand that a bit for our colleague yesterday. But I apologize that I wasn't able to visualize that in time. So it sounds like I went through everything rather quickly, so that I think is a benefit to all of you in that we can have a bit more Q&A. So I'm happy to take questions.
All right, I'll ask a question. So as Al mentioned, I'm sure there are questions about the seed funding. And so There are a couple of items in the solicitation about seed funding and how that might be used in multiple ways. And so as current steering committees and steering committees for the future proposal are thinking about this, does NSF have any guidance on sort of thinking about management of an RFP around that, and maybe you can speak just about the couple of other items that are possible uses of the seed funds.
So I guess I'll talk to the second part of that first. And I think in the solicitation text, of course, I urge you all to read if you're curious to some of the specifics. But in terms of activities that we give as examples of possible activities that can be done, these could be small planning grants. These could be workshops, small sort of meetings to bring people together. In terms of the actual structure of how the seed fund will be managed and sort of what the committee's role and the voting representation, all of that, I think we're leaving those details to the proposers themselves. One aspect that I don't think I talked about directly in this is that one other change from the current iteration of the BD Hubs to this iteration is that the current version of the hubs are standard NSF grants. And the new version that we've announced here will be under cooperative agreements. And for those of you that don't really know the difference, the main difference is that a cooperative agreement has more of a connection to NSF oversight post-award than a standard grant. So many of you have standard grants where you submit an annual report, you get some feedback on it, it's accepted, or you have some revisions to make, and you move on into your next year of your award. In a cooperative agreement, we can set a bit more guidelines to say, for example, we'd like to see what the plan for the seed fund management is, and that needs to be accepted by NSF before the project can move forward. There will be a mid-project review 2 years into the project for this next round of hubs, where we'll have a full review of the activity in a site visit kind of fashion, in which we can sort of understand how to track the activities that are being proposed and how that morphs over time. Since I think many of you have had the experience of proposing something, and then once you start the project, things obviously change. What the cooperative agreement mechanism allows us to do is we are a little bit more closely informed about what those changes are, and in some cases we can have a say of, okay, well, for this level of change, we're going to want to approve that before the project moves forward. So it's somewhat long-winded, but yes.
I have a question about participation from people that are doing data science research and education, but was not involved previous round of data science hub. Mm-hmm. And from what you are talking about, it seems like because of the criteria, there are only 4 awards, there are currently 4 centers, 4 hubs, and most likely going to continue this structure. So how people can get involved for the next round of application?
So for this round of application, I can bring up the eligibility criteria again. This is something that my colleague Beth also talked about a bit in our webinar. If you are curious about, if you have a team that you feel you could put together a proposal for this solicitation, then you can reach out to the PI or co-PI of these awards. They're available through the NSF award search. You can search for BD Hubs, whatever region you're interested in, and you can find the PI or co-PI info. Senior personnel, you'd want to reach out to the hub to get some of that information, since I know that's not public information. That being said, if you are at a stage where your team is not as interested in proposing a new hub, but you want to be involved in the hub, I think this is where you just want to keep a close eye on how this activity progresses. Reach out to your current hub, because as of right now, the Midwest hub is the Midwest hub. They're still active, and you can talk about how you can become involved in that hub. And then no matter what the new phase of hubs looks like, because of this criteria and because we want to ensure that there's transition plans in place for whatever the new hubs look like, there will be that continuity there. So if you have a relationship with the current hub, I think you should expect that that relationship will remain with whatever the future hub entity will look like.
Any more questions for Dr. Suarez? Oh, there we go.
Thanks for the information, Alejandro. So what's the reasoning behind going to a cooperative agreement? Is that an agency-wide shift?
So I think it reflects the nature of these awards and how they're a little bit more focused than standard research grants. So standard research grants, obviously, we want to ensure that the creativity of teams are still able to be fostered, that if you change your plans a little bit as you're going through your activities, that is perfectly fine. I think a good example is another set of activities that we very much fund through cooperative agreements are cyber infrastructure activities. So our the supercomputing centers, the machines that we have funded in several supercomputing centers, the EXCEED program, for those of you familiar with the EXCEED program, the new software institutes and sort of some of the data infrastructure projects, those are funded through cooperative agreements because we understand that the activities that they carry out are supporting a greater community. And that, in some sense, we want to make sure that we have a way of ensuring that that community remains supported in the activities moving forward.
Okay, barring any, oh, there we go.
Could you talk a little bit about the national umbrella coordination, how that might work? Is that a separate proposal? Is that activities within the current BD hubs?
That's a good question. So I think that will be a combination of, again, working through this cooperative agreement. This allows us to have a little bit of those discussions after awards have been made, but I think in the original proposals, we do ask that the proposing organizations have some plan in place. We don't go into, they don't need to go into explicit detail on all of the administrative details. However, I think they should be ready to put forward a discussion of how they are able to leverage previous work that they may have had with other regions and or how they have fostered new connections that they're able to work together moving forward. The specific governance structure and the details such as those, we don't have any specific guidance, and you can always, in the solicitation, you can look through some of that. But we want to make sure that, again, this is the balance between the creativity that we continue to foster and having some oversight capabilities, that we want to make sure that there's freedom for the hubs to organize themselves in the way that they see as most productive. And then once the hubs are awarded, we can work through if there's any additional stitching or things that we can move forward with.
Any final questions? Okay, great. Thanks very much, Al.
Thank you.
So we'd like to welcome the panel from federal agencies, the folks from federal agencies up now, and Brian Athey will take over. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, sure.
Alejandro's going the wrong way. Hi, pal. Oh, I think it's easy. You just hit the green button. Okay. My name is Brian Athey. I'm from the University of Michigan, and I'm co-PI, honored to be co-PI of the Midwest Big Data Hub, and it's great to have everybody still here, and the poster session was great, and it's wonderful that we have 14 states participating in this. It's absolutely great. We are delighted to have such a nice, distinguished and broad panel, and it reflects how data science is really transforming all of society today and science. And so we're going to hear from our panel here in just a second. Here they are. My old friend Val Florence here is from the National Library of Medicine. Charlotte Baer is there from the National Institute for Food and Agriculture from USDA. And Robin will be also saying a few words. He's from there too. NIFA. And then Bruce Kramer is here from the National Science Foundation from the Engineering Directorate. And then Alejandro is making another appearance, the second in a row. And, but this time he'll be speaking from SCI's and Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure perspective. You know, I'll leave this with you. You know, this is just kind of just a few things to think about. One is that the NLM has a strategic plan, 10-year strategic plan you might want to take a look at. And the National Institutes of Health has a strategic plan for data science that's really worth looking at, and will provide some good context. Yesterday, of course, we had Sally Rockey, our old friend from the NIH, who's now at FFAR, and that was an absolutely great talk. And so the idea of, you know, public-private partnerships, and so thinking about that in terms of what NEPA is doing and how there could be a big value add there. We have lots of folks doing digital ag and things like that. And then learning more about NSF Engineering Directorate, of course. And then for me, who got, you know, Dan Atkins used to be my next door neighbor, you know, and so I was brought up from the beginning of cyber infrastructure. So, you know, it's just going to be really interesting to learn from Alejandro what's new in cyber infrastructure and how it relates to data science, because data science indeed is touching all these agencies and transforming society. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Val. And, you know, it's easy to use this. And we're looking forward to hearing what's happening in the lab.
Thank you for the invitation. And when I was invited, someone said, just cover everything NIH is doing about big data. And I said, okay, that takes the day, right? So think of this as an overview that I know these slides are going to be available. And I hope that if you hear something that interests you, the links are here. Go follow it and find out about it. So this is where I'm headed, right? I'm going to do say a few things about what I think of as big ticket NIH initiatives, moonshot type projects. I want to brag about the National Library of Medicine's research grants, because for years we used to call ourselves the NSF of NIH, right? Because we were the only ones who were really focused on this area. And also, just because, in case you haven't ever tried to go out and find partners nearby for topics, NIH's reporter, I'm just going to, there are 2 little lessons in how to quickly find who at your institution is working with NIH money, right? That's one thing, and also on topics you care about. So you know there are 27 of us, 24 are what I call the disease and body part people, right? Those are the categorical institutes. 19 of them are, and there are 5 of us who are more cross-cutting in the sciences we support. And in 2018, our budget was $37 million. We got an increase, thank goodness, and not a cut coming this year, although I don't know the specifics of that yet. So now I'm moving to biomedical informatics and data science, because that's what we care about at NIH, at NLM in particular. All of the institutes and centers at NIH fund research and development in this area in terms of their own mission interests, right? So many of our grantees, for example, also get money from Heart, Lung, and Blood or Kidney or NIAID, because they can apply informatics and data science within studies that are really looking at how to make people healthier. But we're the only institute whose sole focus is this area. So in terms of big initiatives, I'm going to talk about 2 of them because there's a ton of money available, and who doesn't like money? I'm sorry. And then I want to mention, I'm not going to talk about them specifically, but If you're not aware of the NIH Common Fund High Risk, High Reward grants, these are really neat grants, and they give you 5 years of funding, right, at a pretty decent level for some of them. In the funding announcements, they're competed once a year, and in the announcements, they don't talk about our field, but plenty of people can apply and have been funded through these. And one in particular, the NIH Pioneer Awards, you probably heard of them. Those deliver $700,000 a year for 5 years, so come up with a great idea and apply. But I want to start with HEAL. All of you have heard of this by now, perhaps, or perhaps you haven't, but this is the NIH initiative to address addiction long-term. There are really two components to the NIH HEAL initiative. One has to do with opioid misuse, right? And another has to do with pain management. And if you simply Google NIH HEAL, you'll find this link. But right now, we've got like $500 million that we had to spend last year, and we have more coming. So we really, and the reason I'm talking about this, so I borrowed this graphic from one of my colleagues. In the pain side of this world, their interest is really in identifying biomarkers. And so when I look at the path for what that means, I highlighted in yellow some areas that our scientists would say, we know that, right? We do that, and we want to do some more of it. I actually think in this process of identifying, validating biomarkers, there's room for novel approaches of statistics and informatics and computer science. I think we'll actually move this forward faster if our scientists get involved. So I hope you will think about it. This is 2 examples of RFAs that are already out. There are about 20 more coming in the next month or so. And so if you haven't already subscribed to the NIH Guide, you might think about it. And again, I've highlighted language of what they're doing. So there's a first receipt date coming up this month. There are others coming. But I want to point out at the bottom of this, there is a workshop next week that is really going to discuss what they're looking for in more detail. So if this area interests you, you can follow the link in the slides or just go to the HEAL website. So the NIH Brain Initiative has actually been going on for 4 or 5 years already. And this is really an exciting area too. Not all institutes are involved in it. Ours isn't, for example. But what they're doing to look at how individual cells and circuits interact in time and space to really understand how the brain works. Again, $5 billion for the total lifetime of this project, and they've only spent, I don't know, 1. So we have a number of years, lots of, and funds to look at in all different kinds of scientific ways to model and represent how the brain works. And these guys have a request for information out. So if you want to put in your 2 cents worth of what you think they should be spending the money on, this would be a good time. And as was mentioned, NIH does have a strategic plan for data science. It's been published, the link is there, that's another Google thing. I know you don't want me to talk you through all the goals of this. I'll say I'm on 14 of the 46 committees that are thinking about implementation steps for this. I don't need to say it. It's very exciting because I've been at NIH since 2001, and believe me, to have a community-wide discussion on topics related to data and infrastructure and information is truly exciting. But one thing I want to mention, again, to get more detail on this, you can search NIH Strides and find it. We have already made arrangements with 2 commercial cloud vendors to allow our researchers, both intramural and our funded researchers, to take advantage of cloud storage at a reduced cost. NIH is seeking public comment on future data management and sharing policies. NSF's already fixed this, right? But we haven't yet, so we want input on it because it's a vexed question in many of our research communities, for sure. Now I want to brag about my home, the National Library of Medicine. We have a new strategic plan. We have a new director. And our strategic plan is really simple. It has 3 pillars. One is about research. One is about engagement with communities of people, all different kinds of communities and audiences. One is building workforce for a data-driven world. And although I don't have any slides here, after listening to Alejandro, I did want to mention that we spend about 1/4 of our grant budget on training, in university-based training programs, in career development for people. So we're pretty committed to this, and in the NIH strategic planning implementation, we're trying to broaden that into all the other training programs from all the other institutes. Still, we have a strong commitment here, and we've been working on trying to build collaborations. So we funded our training programs. We don't have any centers of our own at NLM, but we have these 16 training programs. So we have funded them to make partnerships with iSchools and with minority-serving institutions and actually with other training programs in the biological sciences to share the data science curriculum that they've developed for biomedical data science. But we also have a research grant, traditional bread and butter NIH stuff, right? This is a research project grant. This year we upped the language to make sure people understand that data science is part of what we're funding. Because we're small and our whole grant budget last year was $60 million, which for us is more than we've had in at least 5 or 6 years. However, it's not very much. And so we focus on novel methods, so I think of us as a place you can test your ideas out in a biomedical domain as opposed to bringing us something you've already built, because that isn't what, others may fund that, but that isn't what we're after. We also have 2 new grant programs. One of them is just has its first applications coming up for review. This is in digital curation. Not that we don't like human curators, but we would like them doing less of it because it will never scale to get all the data curated properly so we can have fair data. And the other is focused on helping consumers and patients, whatever we can do to develop interfaces and tools to help them understand and manage and share their own health information, since increasingly that is what's expected of us. We also have a joint, just freshly issued, right, a joint NSF announcement on generalizable data science methods. I'm not going to read to you what it's all about. It's mission windows in January, so if you want to know more about it, go hunt for it, please. And our website for the extramural programs, we have a list of everything we funded for the last 15 years or so if you want to see the kind of research we support. And you can also find out the names and contacts of our program officers. We love to talk to people about what they want to do and help them. Excuse me. So this is the end of where I'm headed. The NIH Reporter provides a look into what has been funded. So this wouldn't help you look at what's waiting to be funded, but it will help you look at what has been funded. And so, for example, you can search your organization, right, or your region or your state and see who's getting NIH money, right? So that's one way to at least find a partner. If you're not sure if there's neuroscientists in your institution who want to work on the brain, this would be one way to do it. The other way is to look up the topic. And by looking up a topic, you can see which institutes are putting money into it. And that way, you can go to their websites, right, and look at the funding programs they have. We're a huge place, right? We spend a lot of money. We make more than 50,000 grants a year, and so these are just simplifying tools. And this contact information is there. If you send our program officers a paragraph or a page, they'll be happy to have a conversation with you about how it does or doesn't fit with our program or where it might better be placed. And that's all I have to say. Next up. Do you want questions in and out, or what?
I think we'll wait till the end. Yeah, good. Thanks, Val. Okay.
Great.
Charlotte,
I'm-
great.
I'm Charlotte Kirk-Bear, and I am from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and I want to thank you for giving me time this morning to tell you a little bit about our Food and Agriculture Cyber Informatics and Tools initiative. That is our agency's data science initiative. And we talked yesterday about the fact that data are everywhere, and that's especially true in agriculture. The data from the input side, the farming inputs, the production, throughout the production, food production system, all the way to the consumer and the scanner codes that are used in the grocery store. So there are lots of opportunities for data to exist throughout our system. They often exist in silos, though. So we have challenges there. And in addition to the challenges that are associated with the data themselves, we're also really in a new narrative for agriculture. There are new people and players in agriculture. The people who are going into agriculture now are more data savvy. Some are younger and want to farm differently. The players are not only Monsanto and John Deere anymore. As we talked about yesterday, there are a lot of small startup data crunching software companies that are really changing the landscape of the agricultural industries. We have new products. We're talking about producing meat in Petri dishes, and it's expected that that'll be on the market in the next several years. So there's lots of different things happening with the food that we eat. Agriculture is taking place in a lot of different places. It's not just only out on the land anymore. It's also in buildings and on rooftops. And so we have controlled environment agriculture, which is different places. Technologies are advancing rapidly. We've talked about a lot of those, and we know that that's an area that we're striving to keep up with. But most importantly, information and data are prevalent, and we have to figure out how to use those most effectively. So with data and all the information deluge, there are challenges that transcend the collection, the generation and the collection and the handling, and then ultimately having data have an impact. Challenges like ethics and policy that we talked about yesterday afternoon, that transcends that whole data environment, as does data literacy and education. So those are elements that transcend all of the data elements. And at NIFA, what we're looking to do is take the data, the observational science, take that to informational science, so to inform our decisions, but ultimately to take it to predictive science so that we can anticipate what's going to happen and be able to react to it. In our agency, we also are using our own data to try and plan better and understand the programs that we're funding and what they look like. And so what you have in front of you, if you can think about it, it looks like a map. It's a visualization of all of the research that NIFA has funded since the early 2000s. And so picture that as the NIFA world of funded projects. And so each one of those little teeny tiny dots is a project that we funded over time. And what we've done there is to overlay the push pins, you see purple and red push pins, that's data-related research that we funded about a decade ago. So we wanted to get a handle on what we were doing back then. And those projects really fall into three different areas. One is the omics area, which doesn't surprise anybody, genomics and phenomics. The other area is our precision agriculture area, the big circle. And we fund that really primarily through our engineering programs. And then, of course, we've got data science and analytics. So those were the three kind of big buckets that we could see that we were funding data-related research in about a decade ago. And this, by the way, is a visualization that is produced through a knowledge discovery tool that we use internally called PushGraph, which is developed by Chalk Labs. We wanted then to see how that research had changed over time, and so we took a snapshot of a more recent period of time and saw that the intensity of the research funded in all of those areas has greatly increased. So we felt like rather than have it in different pockets, we wanted to put a greater focus on it. And so in 2016, we held a summit to announce our new initiative on food and agriculture, cyber informatics and tools. And we did that in conjunction with, I'm happy to say, with the Midwest Big Data Hub meetings in Chicago. And it was a great place to gather information on what was needed. Prior to that meeting, we set out to get information from our stakeholders. We work very closely with stakeholders when we plan new initiatives and new programs. And so we put together an ideas engine, an online ideas engine, to get input from stakeholders about what the greatest opportunities are for data in agriculture. And we had thousands of people participate from all over the world. The ideas engine was open 24/7, so they were able to provide ideas on what they thought the greatest opportunities were and revise other people's ideas. And over a period of about 3 weeks, both before and after our summit, people came up with ideas about what it is that the federal government, specifically NIFA, should be doing and what the greatest opportunities were for agriculture. And so what we learned from that effort was that the opportunities really fell in 4 different buckets, if you will. One deals with data design and implementation, so addressing the scalable infrastructure, data infrastructure and management systems, and developing best practices and working across different organizations. So that's the data piece of it. The other that we talked a lot about is the analytics piece, so developing data integration and data quality tools to improve our analytical capability, and designing algorithms. And I think Sally Rocky talked about that yesterday to allow us to really better understand massive data. Then the third bucket is technologies. We need technologies that are going to allow us to connect multi-scale data and build real-time or bridge real-time and distributed and parallel data systems, and create new methodologies and frameworks for allowing us to track and process data. The fourth element, which kind of surprised us a little, but I think is actually becoming more and more important as we think about things, is the human technology and data interactions. And that's the social science piece. So we need to understand how ag data and the computer systems that we're developing interact with humans. You can develop all sorts of algorithms and you can do all sorts of things with data, but if the end user can't use it, then it doesn't serve its purpose. So we're looking at those kinds of interactions. We need to pay more and more attention to those. We want to be able to integrate visualization more effectively to help people understand their data. Not everybody's a data scientist, but we need to have the visualization. We want to be able to engage students early on to improve data literacy. And so the education component, we've all talked about that, is extremely important. And then developing decision support tools that will allow us to use the data. So after understanding what our stakeholders felt were the biggest challenges and opportunities for data in agriculture, we then solicited workshops that would help us explore some of those issues in a little more depth. And so in 2017, we funded about a dozen workshops across a whole different realm of topics. So everything from production agriculture to genomics and phenomics to the food, water, energy nexus to empowering limited resource and small farmers. But I put the SM in parentheses there typically, when we're talking about data, most people think of large farmers and large companies that deal with data. But there's a segment of agriculture that are limited resource, small farmers that don't even have access to, broadband and cell phones. And so we need to be thinking about, as we implement these things and deal with data science, we need to be thinking about this, all types of farmers. And then finally, we funded a workshop at the National Agricultural Library on data management and publication for researchers in information science. So there's a whole element there that we need to be thinking about, and it's extremely important. So after funding those workshops and learning a little bit more, again, we go back to our stakeholders, and we have an effort that we call NIFA Listens, where we go around the country and talk to stakeholders and ask them what they think is important for us to be investing in. And in this case, we weren't specifically asking about data science, we were asking about anything agriculture. And what came up when we analyzed the responses that we got was that that agriculture is extremely interconnected, and that it involves the economic and the social and the ag and the ecological and the technical components, and that in order to make best use of those and to be successful in integrating those, the solutions are going to come from data and technology to better manage those systems. So across all topics that anyone could have brought up, these were the ones that rose to the forefront. So we certainly know that this is a huge issue, and we're investing more and more as we go forward. So in 2018, we had to start somewhere, and so we identified 4 different focus areas to make investments in, and one is education. So we wanted to provide opportunities for undergraduates to work with researchers and extension experts to improve their data literacy and to get experiences. And so that's a piece that really doesn't exist right now in terms of matching students with extension experts and allowing them to work on data science problems. The second area that we focus on is agriculture and the food system, and that's inviting proposals from research and extension across all components of agriculture and all types of agriculture, whether it's traditional or urban or controlled environment. The third area is looking at agriculture and the environment, so making use of all the information that's been collected over the years and integrating and networking and synthesizing that information better for agriculture. And the fourth area is economics and social sciences, and specifically the economic implications and applications of big data. And Robin will say a little bit more about that because that's a growing area of interest for us. So in 2018, we had requests for applications in our Agriculture and Food Research Initiative Competitive Grants Program, and we had 2 requests for applications. One was dealing with education and workforce development, and that's where the undergraduate experiences are. And the second area is in our foundational and applied sciences request for application. We actually highlighted data science in all areas of that request for applications that address all Farm Bill priorities. So animal health production and products, plant health production and products, food safety and nutrition, bioenergy and environment, and economics and rural communities. So we invited proposals in any of those areas that dealt with data science and applying data science to those areas. And so that spanned the entire request for applications, but we had specific programs within our agriculture systems and technology priority area, which is where our food and agriculture, cyber informatics and tools program priority area exists, and then we also have some in the economics and the bioenergy areas. And so this slide, if you're interested in applying, I know that some of you already applied to some of these programs, but if you're interested in applying in the future, we anticipate having our next request for applications out early in the year. And I don't anticipate that it will change dramatically from what you see here. If anything, we are expanding. We're in current conversations with other agencies to develop partnerships and leverage each other's efforts in this way. So these are the areas that we're currently concentrating on. And to give you a sense of what we're doing, we aren't at the scale of NIH by any means, but since 2013, we have invested $30 million in about $6,500,000 grants. That's since 2013, so about the past 5 years. In 2018, we anticipate investing an equal amount, almost $30 million across our agriculture and food research initiative in grants that are $500,000 for up to 4 years or $1 million for up to 5 years. So we're going to invest just that much in a single year. So I'm happy to answer questions, and I wanted to end also by saying if you didn't happen to apply this time or this year, but you are interested in the program, we are always happy to receive expressions of interest in terms of serving on our review panels. And so if you're interested in serving as a reviewer, please let me know, and we can get that to the appropriate program. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Did we want to have Robin come up right now? Why don't we do that? That was great.
Yeah, I'm Robin Shoemaker, a program leader in economics at NIFA as well. And I just wanted to sort of add on a little bit to what Charlotte was talking about. So I run the Agriculture, Economics, and Rural Communities program, and that's a program where we look at, broadly at the economics of food and agriculture, natural resources across the sector. And we wanted to expand into this area in that context and focusing on examining and developing the applications of big data to agricultural production and across the whole food supply chain. And also look at the implications of the advance of this area of science. Applications look at, utilize the data for looking at different varied policy instruments like crop insurance or even, food stamp programs, food safety across the supply chain, a whole range of issues where we want to understand how the system and how the markets work across there and efficiently provide inputs and outputs. But as this teenager enters college, or maybe it's going into graduate school, we really need to understand what are the implications of this science and its impact it can have on society, and impact it can have differentially. Charlotte sort of mentioned this digital divide that exists between different size farm operations and other entities. And so we want to understand, are there some equity impacts that can affect people differently, and are some people left out of this opportunity for growing the economy, essentially. So those are the range of issues that we're starting to look at. Again, we had this call this past year. We anticipate the new one being out the first of the year, and likewise, we look for applicants and reviewers. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Thanks, Robin. Okay. Bruce, I think you're next. Yeah.
Well, good morning. I'm Bruce Kramer. I'm from the National Science Foundation, and my specialty is manufacturing. I want to warn you in advance that this talk is going to be not so much an overview, but a synthesis. My main objective in being here is to support your efforts to get your manufacturing effort underway and to try to give a little bit of a jump start to those efforts. I think that big data issues are very, very important, and the opportunity is so vast that it's hard to find a focus. And so these are more or less my personal opinions on where a promising focus might be. I've been at the NSF for quite a while. The most interesting thing I do is to staff our Assistant Director for Engineering, Dawn Tilbury, in her role as the NSF lead in the National Advanced Manufacturing Program. I've had a wonderful opportunity to interact with all the agencies in this, including the the publication of the Strategic Plan for American Leadership in Advanced Manufacturing that was published just this past October on Manufacturing Day, October 5th. I think it's worth taking a look at. Okay, so you've got all the buzzwords here, all the topic areas. You've all heard these, and you're all working on these. There is an incredible opportunity here someplace, and that's pretty much where we are. Manufacturing produces more data than any other industry. Financial services is in second place, if you can believe it. With the internet, the industrial Internet of Things, there will be even more data. And so there must be an opportunity in here someplace, but nobody's quite sure what the opportunity is. I think there's a chance to define some underlying opportunities that support all of those buzzwords and all those efforts. And so again, this is a very personal perspective, but I hope you find it interesting. There are really two fundamental challenges in design and manufacturing, but by that what I mean is changing designs into products. That's really what manufacturing is. The first is reliable design to manufacturing translation. When we use a computer, we're never in doubt that the commands will execute, or we're almost never in doubt, or they almost always execute. In manufacturing, that's not the case. We've been on a long road for at least 40 years that I know of making the tools that do that translation more and more reliable, but they're not all that reliable yet. And most of the human effort that goes into creating products involves troubleshooting those translations, figuring out what went wrong and fixing it. So the grand challenge is 100% reliable execution. It's like hitting a key on the keyboard. You never are much in doubt about whether that's going to execute flawlessly. The second is ubiquitous process control. We've got all these processes running in the plant once the instructions are worked out and debugged, and things go wrong there too. Tools fail, processes go out of control, et cetera, et cetera. So we'd like to do in-process control. We've got computers, we've got sensors, we've got the ability to develop process models. We've known for at least 60 years that I'm aware of that was promising almost since the invention of the computer. The plain fact is that those methodologies, as well understood as they are rarely used today in industry. There are two exceptions. One is if you're producing a product that's so expensive that you can invest the time and energy that's required to develop a process model that can be used in process control. Think semiconductor wafers. You know, if $1 million of wafers is at risk every time you do an operation and you're doing 172 consecutive operations, it's worth spending a lot of money to make sure that every one of those is as reliable as it can be. And the second is huge volumes. If you're an auto company and you're making hundreds of thousands or millions of parts, if you add up all the cents that you save on each part by doing process control, you can afford to do it. But in most, the vast majority, in spite of the long history, the production savings are not greater than the cost of doing the control, and therefore it's not done. It's a lot easier to go a little slower, get a little reliability that comes from doing that, than get another 5% of efficiency out of the process. So that's where we are. Current approaches. First main approach that we've taken, and again, we've been on this road for decades, many decades, is we've got human experts who know how to do this. They're the people who troubleshoot these things. Why can't we just build all that human expertise into software, and then anybody could take advantage of all of the accumulated expertise of everybody who's ever figured out a manufacturing plan or designed a product? Where's the unexploited opportunity? Well, I think we're entering an age now where we can realize that there are billions of products that have already been designed, that have already been produced, where all of the translational problems have been solved by human experts. Somehow, all of that knowledge is embodied in the designs of those parts. we're taking no advantage of that. We're still on the track of figuring out what the experts know and incrementally improving these software tools to perfection eventually. And I hope we get there. I think it's going to be wonderful when we get there. I'm sure we will get there, but it's likely to be many more decades. The problem with ubiquitous process control is the analytical models lack generality. I mean, we get so many proposals at NSF. I'm going to develop a process model for this little itty-bitty thing that needs to be done, and once we get enough of those little itty-bitty examples, this generality will emerge that will allow us to do everything that's left and make it very inexpensive to do that. Well, it hasn't happened yet. I mean, in fact, what's happening is the better the tools get, the deeper and deeper the solutions are and the less generality there is. And in fact, even on those semiconductor wafers, once you get it working on this machine and you try to get it working on the machine next to it that you think is exactly the same as that machine, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time and effort getting it to work on that machine. So there's very little generality. I don't know if machine learning is going to work, but at least machine learning promises some generality. Who knows what the machine learning algorithms will discover that cuts across different processes. So I think it's a very promising thing to look at and see if there is real potential there. Unfortunately, those machine learning algorithms require lots and lots of data. And the more data they have, the better they do. And we've got an industrial culture that demands secrecy. You know, you're not going to get in trouble if you keep everything secret. If you give up anything, even if something seems worthless, and believe me, 99.99% of that manufacturing data is worthless. And in fact, 99.9% of it is probably never looked at. But there's a risk if you share it, and there's no risk if you never share it. So what's the unexploited opportunity? I think the real problem here as far as big data in manufacturing is, how do we address this accessibility issue? I mean, the perfect example is General Electric. You know, when, you may know this, but when an airline buys a jet engine from General Electric to put on their plane, the contract states that General Electric owns the data. Airline doesn't even get to see the data. And the reason for that is General Electric owns every piece of data for every model of engine that they produce. They've got all the data, they can do the best machine learning, they could send you the best maintenance and repair, sell you the best maintenance and repair services. So how do we address that issue? As I said, we've been on this path for a long time. The story goes is, you can see a computer-aided design screen there. That design emerges from nothing, de novo. It comes up on that computer screen using the analytical tools, the knowledge of the designer. Everything goes in there, and finally it's complete, and it gets sent off to manufacturing. This is the track we're on. This does not reflect the real world of design and manufacturing. So what are the unstated assumptions? I told you the first one. The designs emerged de novo from nothing. It's wonderful. All that expertise, fantastic. And the second was, each manufacturer will make anything that is within the capabilities of their plant. So we get lots of proposals at NSF. I'm going to develop a database system that's going to figure out if that factory can make this part that I just designed. Well, I hate to tell you, but most of the factories that can make your part don't want to talk to you. Most manufacturers specialize in producing a very limited class of parts in various parametric variations. You've got to find the manufacturer who does produce what you want or something similar to it. That's most of the problem. And the beauty of that is, if you find somebody who produces something that's very close to what you want to make, even if they don't want to talk to you, they probably know somebody who does make what you want to make. It's incredibly valuable information. And again, billions of parts already exist with all the problems solved. So there's a hierarchy that emerges in our need to use the expertise of the best experts in manufacturing. And they're expensive and their time is limited. So for genuinely new part designs, we need them. General Electric needs to have thousands of engineers on staff. They're always designing at the state of the art. They need the best stuff they can get. It's wonderful. We should always do that. The analogy I usually use is TurboTax. You know, TurboTax doesn't tell you that it'll make you any tax return you can imagine. Just try us. It says, look, I got these forms. If this is what you need, I'll make you a perfect tax return. It just so happens that in 99% of cases, that's a perfect solution, right? If it doesn't work, go find yourself an accountant. They're very talented, they're very specialized, and they'll figure out how to do your tax return. The second easiest class, the second class is parts that can be varied parametrically to make the design you want. Maybe the holes are smaller than on the design, maybe the location is different, maybe the thickness, but it's easy. It's easy to vary the dimensions or some critical dimensions to get what you need. And finally, parts identical to those that have already been produced, they're those 100% guaranteed execution parts. That manufacturer knows what tool they used, they know they have the machine tool, they know what cutting tools they used, they already have the part program that drives the machine tool, they know how to inspect it, they know what material it was made out of, and even better than that, most of those parts have already been in service. They've proven that the designs work. I mean, it's a dream come true. That's what you want. It's a guaranteed high profit part for the manufacturer. They can charge you twice what it costs them to make, and they're delighted. And it's a guaranteed cheap part for you. It's probably the cheapest part you can buy anywhere. So it's wonderful commercially. So I've covered most of this. Parts that have already been produced have all the design expertise in them. They have all the manufacturing expertise. They've been tested. They can be provided at low cost. And they are co-located with design experts who can solve your problem for you. There's another opportunity here, not to talk about commercial opportunity from the NSF. But, oh, this is being recorded, isn't it? but you know, this is a schematic of the aerospace supply chain. And there are lots of small and medium-sized companies that are in that supply chain, and they've got one customer, or maybe a few customers. And you may not be familiar with this, but the 5 minutes, okay? The role of a small or medium-sized business in a supply chain is to reduce their costs to the prime by 2% every year. This could give those companies a chance to break out of that pyramid and offer their services more widely. Well, I guess all I'll say about this is that this sounds fantastic, but it's been done before. At the turn of the century, the NSF made 6 digital library awards. They were substantial awards. They were like $5 million awards, which was a lot back then. 5 of those 6 were modestly successful. They employed information scientists to curate collections of information. But they were very cumbersome to use, and they never really got big. I'm sure everybody in this room knows that the 6th one was Stanford, and that turned into Google. And the only point I really want to make is Google knows nothing about the content of the web page it finds, and it doesn't use any of the techniques that information scientists use to find data. So we need those tools. We need those tools for manufacturing. And we need those. The point of this slide is, once the tools become useful, once there's a way to make a buck using the tools, even if they're not very good, it doesn't take very long for them to improve. So we went from Mosaic to Internet Explorer in 2 years. We went from Lycos to Google in 4 years. And we went from front page to be able to use Microsoft Word to make a web page in 4 years. So what tools do we need? We need something that's equivalent to a web page. You know, the easy way to think about this is a computer-aided design model. It looks like a computer-aided design model to the web browser, and a manufacturer can modify that tool to create a web page, load up their 3D model, indicate which parameters can be varied and how much they want them to be varied. So that's an easy user interface. We essentially have that. Web browsers are good enough. And what we need is a search engine. How do we find those parts? Let's say all those parts were made available because we solved the problems with data access. How can we let a browser crawl through all those CAD designs, catalog them, categorize them, so they could be searched and found? It is a wonderful grand challenge for a big data hub. Google Part Match. This is not a new idea. There's lots of stuff out there. I'll skip through it. We need something better than these. Voxelization, I think, is very interesting. GPUs are getting very fast. They're not quite fast enough. These voxelized designs should be very compressible. We need homomorphic compression algorithms to preserve the key geometrical features. Data access, there's no incentive now for manufacturers to share part designs. Data access is a global problem for machine learning. Until we solve the problem, there won't be data to learn from. There are a bunch of possible models. Encryption and anonymization is always a possibility. Tools for identifying critical data. You know, if we could search through all that manufacturing data and find the 0.1% that should be kept secret, the rest of it might be able to be shared. Vendor ownership of data, that's the GE model I presented. Aggregators. Let's talk about data aggregators buying data from manufacturers and then coming up with machine learning solutions to manufacture problems and then selling them back to the manufacturers. You could have a trusted aggregator. It might be the Department of Defense, or it might be a production of CAD systems. They've already got large libraries of manufactured parts that they keep secret. The search engines could run inside their firewalls, potentially. And the Europeans are investigating standards. EC-COM 2018-232 is final. It's more of a plan to have a plan than a plan, but it's a step towards regulation. So I thank you for that. Oh, and parenthetically, you could consider sending a proposal.
Okay, Alejandro, number 2.
All right. So all of you heard me ramble for 20 minutes earlier, so I'm going to try to be relatively brief here. And I just want to make sure that you all can get some of this information, since I believe in the past 5 days, no less than 4 cyber infrastructure-related solicitations have come out, so there has been quite the onslaught. So I apologize for the fire hose, but I'm going to try to make sure that there's some discussion, so I'm going to go really quickly here. I talked about the big ideas in my earlier talk, so I won't touch too much here. Harnessing the Data Revolution obviously is one that's very connected to this group here. There are some other infrastructure-related things that I might just talk about in terms of mid-scale research infrastructure. For those of you that are looking into center-scale activities or other somewhat large projects that aren't at the level of the MREFC, large facilities, that's something that mid-scale research is focusing on. So that's something to keep an eye on. We've had some recent Dear Colleague letters about that. So I won't go too much into the HDR since I talked about that this morning. I do want to talk about one of the facets of HDR, though, which is the idea of convergence accelerators. So these are going to be these very, very targeted kinds of projects that are much more focused even than when I was talking about running the big data hubs as if they're as cooperative agreements. These are very intentionally managed, shorter timelines. They have milestones, they have deliverables, there are specific partnerships that are put in place. There have been some proposed convergence accelerators within the HDR big idea. There's some future accelerators that may also be announced. Also the future of work big idea. Right now, this is very, very sort of tentative. The only language or definitive language I can point you to is the fiscal year 19 budget request that talks a little bit about what these ideas of the convergence accelerators would look like. So please go check the budget request that we had to Congress for that. Another new solicitation that just recently came out, I think on Friday, is Harnessing the Data Revolution Data Science Core. So this is a solicitation specifically to help build this strong national data science infrastructure and through workforce. This solicitation specifically looks towards enabling partnerships for undergraduate students. There's a lot I could go into, but I want to keep things really short. Please look up that NSF 19-518 for more information about that. Also, there have been a couple of workshops that talked about what the vision of the data science core may look like. There was one out of Georgetown. You can read up on the workshop report about that. That really sort of set the stage for what the research community was really looking for in terms of this core. So please find more information there. Another new education-focused, training-focused solicitation that was recently released, that is the cyber training solicitation. So this is run out of our office, the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure. It's a training-based workforce development for advanced cyber infrastructure. So this is an interesting program that really looks into 3 classes of workforce when it comes to cyber infrastructure, and that is CI innovators, those that are producing or developing new types of infrastructure for the research community. You have the CI users, which are the research disciplines that are using these machines. And you also have the CI professionals. So these are people that are at those systems day in, day out, making sure that they're fully operational, making sure that users are able to connect to them and make their code work most efficiently on them, to even on the research end be able to transfer the problem that they are trying to solve, the challenge that they are working with, into whatever the architecture of the system that they're working on is going to look like. So looking at these 3 kinds of activities, there's some goals to this solicitation, which is looking at ensuring broad adoption of tools, methods, and resources by the research community, integrating core literacy and discipline-appropriate advances. These are in a few different kinds of scales: pilot scale, implementation scale, and conceptualization of large projects. So there's some detail there on the different sizes of the awards. So again, I urge you to look at NSF 19-524. That I think it was just posted yesterday. So if you look it up, you may see just the program page. It may take another few hours for the actual solicitation text to come through the website. You've all probably been on this roller coaster before. Please just stay tuned. It should be up in the next 24 hours or so. Another new solicitation that I believe came out just a week or 2 ago was the cloud access solicitation. So this is NSF 19-510, and it's all about enabling access to cloud computing resources for the computer science research disciplines. And what this really looks at is the motivation behind this there were several reports out of the National Academies, out of some NSF-funded workshops, some of our own advisory committees, that really talked about this challenge that researchers are facing right now, where a lot of PIs are seeing that there's value in using commercial cloud for their research efforts, but a lot of that ends up just being ad hoc, one-on-one. Each PI is trying to set up some agreement with a cloud provider to be able to get the resources they need. And what this solicitation really aims to do is it's meant to be a pilot with SAI's researchers to try to find if there's a better way to negotiate that kind of infrastructure. So the way that this is envisioned is that you would have PIs funded through our office that need some sort of cloud resources. Instead of going directly to the cloud providers to try and make their one-off agreements, they will be going to some slightly more centralized cloud entity, and that cloud entity has a lot more leverage to be able to make beneficial arrangements with the cloud service providers so that everyone's benefiting here. So again, let me just put that up, NSF 19-510. I should note that this is meant to be a large-scale award. It's between 4 and 5 million over 5 years. It's going to fund a single entity to serve this purpose. And There's several others. I wanted to just keep things really brief since I know we wanted to have some discussion here. So I talked about the convergence accelerators, the data science core, cyber training, cloud access. I don't have any updates right now for the big data solicitation. Just keep an eye out for that. Another recently announced solicitation for those interested in cybersecurity, the CC program, Cybersecurity Innovation for Cyber Infrastructure. That just recently posted, I think, in the past day or two as well. That is NSF 19-514. If you have questions about that, feel free to contact, I believe Kevin Thompson is the program director responsible for that, and you can find his contact information through that. Obviously, I talked about the BD regional hubs. Something else that I wanted to just briefly talk about, even though I don't have any updates to share right now, is I'm sure many of you are aware, but just in case, the software for sustained innovation and the data infrastructure building blocks programs, the sort of software institutes and DIBS, those have been merged about a year and a half ago into the CSSI program. So we just had a couple of iterations of that. So just keep an eye out for continuing activities at the intersection of software and data research efforts. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. Why don't we go right to some questions? Don't you think, Melissa, given the time? Questions from the audience.
Questions are good, and we'll just move into we'll to eat up some of the break time. It's just fine. So open for questions.
Cool.
Yes, this is kind of in regard to the what Val was talking about earlier about the storage, and it kind of ties in with the 19.510 solicitation. In your storage arrangement, are you able to articulate or share, if it's not under NDA, you're getting storage at a reduced price from Google and Amazon, I think you said, and is that through volume purchase, or are you subsidizing the front end to allow a reduced price to the researcher?
So I wish I could answer that question. That's why I encourage you to Google NIH Strides.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm not the one who was involved in developing it. Our CI, the NIH Computer Technology Center is. So that's where the details are. Sorry.
Okay. And it kind of ties into the other solicitation. We've, as a state of Ohio, I run the network, research network here in Ohio. We've tried to aggregate purchasing with Amazon. And to be candid, have waived similar amounts of money, if not more, under their nose to say, hey, if we guarantee this, we get a better deal, and the answer is no. You know, they just go, no, we have a perfectly linear model. We don't care how much you buy. The profit margin has to be on a per unit. And so I think this is an interesting.
I would like to add something.
Yes, sure.
I believe that part of the appeal of the NIH arrangement are huge data sets that we have. They want, right? They want them in the cloud because then there are tools and training and all kinds of other things they can do. That's my perspective without having been involved.
I think you're right. I mean, they've actually offered some free stuff to us, but it's kind of, I call it the drug dealer approach. You know, we'll give this to you for this period of time for nothing, but now you want more of that.
Yeah.
It's got to cost you, kid. But anyhow, thank you.
So I guess I can just talk a little bit from the NSF side, and I should preface that with having not been quite so intimately involved with that specific solicitation, but I have been involved a lot with, on the cyber infrastructure end of things, sort of what challenges and questions and visions we've been thinking about in terms of the traditional model of cyber infrastructure allocation of resources. So for example, with the Exceed program, you know, we have a long history of, 20 plus years of members of the research community can propose, I want this many thousand CPU cycles to be able to do this project. You can get it or you don't get it or you get some portion of it. And we have some cloud resources that we funded, like Jetstream, for example, though there's some interesting challenges when it comes to how do you allocate, if you're still within the CPU allocation type of model, how do you allocate resources to a cloud machine similar to, you know, the Amazon or the Google type of model? And I think activities such as cloud access want to also think about how users can be able to coordinate their requests for these kinds of activities, similar to their coordinating their requests for CPU types of allocations. So in the economics of it, I think, are overwhelmingly discussed as sort of what are the possible savings to that, but I think the coordination mechanisms themselves are a big piece of this too, and I'm happy to send out any information about these vision workshops that talked about these kinds of challenges and why having more coordinated mechanisms to share cloud resources may help that.
Great. Another question? Thanks, Alejandro.
Hello. Dr. Kramer, I have a question for you about, you mentioned about we want to have data-driven or machine learning model that can be general enough to adapt in different manufacturing process requirement. But you also mentioned about you prefer to find out automaker have 100% reliable or accurate models for different kind of operation. But do you think there's a conflict between these two goals? For example, we have trained university or college students basic science so that they can take different and various kind of job in the market, right? But compared with students from professional school, they train for specific skills so they can work on specific tasks reliably, accurately, but they may not be able to adapt to different type of jobs. And based on my understanding about data science and big data research, we try to make machine train like human, right? So if there's already have conflicts between college students versus student from professional school, how do we consider about the generosity versus reliability together? You got my question?
I am? Okay, thank you. So it's a cosmic question. You know, there probably are a lot of missed opportunities for computer repair technicians that are frustrated by error checking algorithms. There's a huge tension there between making manufacturing systems more productive and reliable and employing the people in them to fix the failures of execution. And that's a societal problem, I think. And it's a problem we've dealt with over time. And traditionally, throughout time, what has been the solution is to broaden out the concept of what work is and to provide different jobs that take advantage of that broadened concept. I think if you look 30 or 40 years ago, there were much fewer exercise instructors than there are today, and much fewer baristas, and much fewer personal coaches, and much fewer financial advisors. And so my guess is that'll continue to happen. What those jobs will be, I couldn't begin to tell you.
So I just wanted to chime in a little bit, since I interpreted the question slightly differently. So I wanted to selfishly ask my version of it, which is,
Please do.
Within data science, I think there's this idea of not letting perfect be the enemy of the good. Yeah. And that if you can generate a really great algorithm that gets you 98% there, that can be very impactful. I think that the challenge in manufacturing may be how useful is an algorithm that gets you 98% there when you're in a Six Sigma organization where you want those 6 nines, and okay, what does 98% get us if we have to retool everything and we still have to spend 95% of our investments to still get those 6 nines? So I don't know if you can.
I think there are few enough Six Sigma situations that even getting 10% of the way there would be a huge help. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Thank you.
Okay, back there.
My question is to all the panelists. In terms of education, training, and task force development, there are some programs like quantum computing from NSF provide some startup funding for recruiting faculty members. I don't know whether any of the government agency might have some program to support that in data science related faculty positions.
Okay, that's a challenging one.
Let me understand,
money
you
for
said,
faculty.
so programs to support the recruitment of faculty members?
To allow department to recruit faculty members in those areas.
So I'll give you one example from NLM. We have a career award, that's what we call it, right, for people who have just graduated, gotten their doctoral degrees, and it provides like 75% of their salary and a pile of research fund money for them to start their research in a new position. That's as close as we don't give the money to the university in advance, right? The person has to be there for us. Now, other institutes have other approaches to that kind of support for people who are in the transition from
Right.
school.
Right, the K9900 mechanism is really a good
ROOs,
one.
right, or another version of that.
Mhm.
But those are the two I'm most familiar with from our side, anyway.
NSF has a career program too, but it's mostly for established faculty and usually for young faculty at least a few years into their careers.
And just for the size perspective, I can't give too much detail since I'm not intimately aware of all of the details of it, but I know that we have the Size Research Initiation Initiative, which it has some similar flavors to the NSF Career Awards, but there are some major differences there. So again, it's not funding the institution to recruit more, but it's ensuring that interesting talent can be able to make an impact. So that's something else to look for, the CRII program.
And at USDA, of course, we have sabbaticals that we're funding more and more of those through Robin's program in terms of helping faculty go and get the education and the experience that they need in data science. But it's not what you were asking, but that's as close as we have.
Right, good. That uncovered some nice mechanisms across the agencies. Thanks. One more question? Okay, then I think, Melissa, with the interest of time, we'll thank the panelists. I think this was an incredibly broad and wide-ranging discussion, and it could only be hosted by something like the NSF Data Hubs, and I think it's really fantastic. Thanks for coming all this way and sharing your wisdom and expertise with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was good.
We've got a break now for about almost 20 minutes. Thank you.
And Dawn's my friend. We just had her give one of our keynotes for our conference. Yeah. Boy, it's neat to see what's going on in the USDA.
No worries. We've got 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Adam, feel free to jump in. Okay. Organizations and community partnerships.
Okay, I'm going to call us back to order. I will start right on the hour. Just so y'all are prepared, I will start on the hour to take full advantage of that time we have with this upcoming panel. While we're getting ready for this panel, I have just a couple of housekeeping announcements. Please, if you will, if you haven't filled out evaluations, they're available online and in paper on your table. There are still some slots available for tours of the Interactive Commons. That's the HoloLens lab here on campus. If you're interested in taking one of those tours, please go to the registration desk. We can get you signed up. And finally, for those of you that are signed up, the times that you're plugged in are also available at the registration desk. We'll start in just about one minute here, just so that the live stream folks are back on with us. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Glenn Reichart. He's the founder and chief technology officer of US Ignite, a nonprofit organization with a mission to create an ecosystem of innovative applications in smart and connected communities, leveraging emerging technologies. Glenn has a long history in information and networking technology. I'll leave it to him to tell you more about himself, but we're very grateful for him coming to join us to lead this panel, and I'll let him do the rest of the introductions. Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. It's great to be here and to be in Cleveland. Now, I live in Salt Lake City. US Ignite is a nonprofit. We're a research nonprofit in DC. We do smart gigabit communities. But I went to school here in Cleveland, and so I feel like Cleveland's my community in some ways, and we haven't really featured enough about Cleveland yet in the meeting since we're in Cleveland. So I thought I'd first show you a picture of downtown Cleveland, and then tell you a little bit more about it. This building right here is the Peter B. Lewis building. It houses the School of Management, and it's a Frank Gehry designed building, and it's 3 minutes that way. So if you'd like to see a really fantastic, interesting Frank Gehry, we have one right here in Cleveland. As far as I know, it's the only one in the Midwest. So this is your chance to go see a genuine Frank Gehry building, and of course, it's a fantastic school there. Case Western Reserve, where we're located, is one of the top 5 schools in the Midwest, and they're very glad to have you here. So in addition to the school, of course, the Cleveland Clinic is probably one of the 2 go-to medical centers in the United States, along with the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So Cleveland Clinic is right here. They provide a very strong healthcare anchor for the Cleveland economic system. There's one of the bus rapid transit lines is called the Health Line, and it runs between here and downtown, going through that medical center core, and past the Midtown Tech Hive, right? Do I get it right, Dorothy? Okay, and that bus line goes right through there. You may also want to go and visit one of the top art museums in the world. It's always listed among the 3 or 4 best art museums in the United States, and it ranks in the world. It's the Cleveland Museum of Art. It's about 7 minutes that way. Again, easily walkable, and you may want to see some of its 4,500 articles on exhibit, not to mention the ones not on exhibit. Lots of very strong art, sculpture, painting. And this is the Cleveland Orchestra, one of the big 5 orchestras in the United States. They play in Severance Hall. That's the building right next door over here. And just an unbelievable orchestra. And it's the way I met my wife, so I decided that's something that I needed to really point out. And for newer music fans, we've got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here in the city. And if you appreciate any of that music, a visit to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is definitely in order. So I wanted to tell you just a quick bit about US Ignite and why we're interested in data. You see here a picture that's got 25 cities, including one in Australia, that are part of our smart gigabit communities. What are smart communities? Smart communities are communities that leverage and operate on data. There's quite a bit of data being collected in these communities. A lot of them have sensor programs. A lot of them are looking in AI, autonomy. A lot of the topics that we've talked about here at the conference are being explored at various areas here. If you go to usignite.org and look at the applications, we have more than 100 applications. More than half of them are big data applications to make regions and cities smarter in this country. So with that, I wanted to talk about what's unique about Cleveland in that way, because Cleveland is one of the smart gigabit communities that you saw on that map. This is a map showing the fiber that's available through a company called Everstream, which was formed originally by nonprofits in the Cleveland area as the One Community organization. And notice the density of those purple lines around Cleveland. In Cuyahoga County, the county we're in right now, there is an incredible wealth of connectivity between the community anchor institutions that's provided through what was originally the One Community Network and is now expanded through the Midwest. You can see there's a really nice fit to most of the Midwest big data hub areas through Everstream. And that's one of the reasons that attracted US Ignite to Cleveland as one of those smart gigabit communities. Everybody has a reason for being there. Champaign-Urbana, Julian Chen is here from Big Broadband in Champaign-Urbana, is there because they got an ARRA grant, one of the BTOP grants, to put fiber to underserved homes. So that's a reason to have them. Cleveland had this fantastic fiber organization. And of course, they've spun out something called Digital C, and we have Dorothy Bonnick here from Digital C, who will tell you a little bit about how they're leveraging this to provide for greater digital equity and inclusion. So that's what we wanted to present in the way of organizations and community data partnerships in Cleveland. We've got an unbelievable panel here. I am so pleased to have these folks. From your left to your right is Adam Przezinski. Adam is with the Metro Health Center at Case Western Reserve University. Can you point where your office is? Which direction from Twing? I was pointing the other directions. Right over that way. Okay, got it. Thank you. His work represents a career-long effort to make the most of available data resources for solving problems at the intersection between medicine and social science. He has a forthcoming book on health disparities and the social determinants of health, and another on structural equation modeling. I want to read the one on structural equation modeling. That sounds like it should be a lot of fun. But I think the social determinants of health is really important as well. Next to him is Dorothy Bonnick, as I said, the CEO of Digital C. She has more than 30 years of experience creating, transforming, and leading organizations that serve as cornerstones of Ohio's technology and information ecosystem. As CEO of Digital C, she's working to leverage the region's robust technology assets to address the deep digital divide and unlock the future of a more equitable, data-driven Cleveland, and she'll tell us more about that. Next to Dorothy is Seth Pinkney. Seth is with Cuyahoga Community College and the co-founder of Hack Cleveland. He's a technologist with over a decade of experience in digital advocacy. He is the co-founder of Hack Cleveland, a project of the Cleveland Neighborhood Progress that focuses on addressing systemic inequities through, by, and with technology. Seth is interested in how data systems can empower communities of color by utilizing tools like statistical modeling, data visualization, and crowdsourcing to fight bias, build progressive movements, and to promote civic engagement. And at the end is Will Scora. Raise your hand there, Will. Will is a developer at the Cleveland Public Library and co-founder and captain of Open Cleveland, a Code for America brigade, one of the, how many Code for America brigades do we have now? 80?
Yeah.
Something like 80 Code for America brigades across the country, which really do a lot for civic hacking, which is hacking for good to help their community, and advocates for open civic data and works with local government to improve services through web technology and open data. He also likes making and viewing maps, as do I. Let's give these folks a hand. So I'd like to begin the discussion by asking first Will, and then coming down the line here, to talk a little bit about what some of the data assets and opportunities there are in Cuyahoga County and Cleveland, and specifically what do you see and energizes you in the big data movement here?
So specifically with the first part, I'll address with what type of data resources that we have. I'll be frank and honest. In some ways, I think Cleveland is a little bit behind the ball relative to other cities across the country. For example, we don't have like any central open data repository or open data policy that would guide at a municipal level the release of city-held data resources. However, I would say, in spite of that, our local community has sort of filled that vacuum, for lack of a better term, through organizations like Digital C and CASE's own Urban Poverty Center, which is hosted in the Mandel School of Social Sciences, if I got that name correct. I hope I did. Specifically, like what organizations like those do, as a lot of you are data scientists, provide the nitty-gritty ETL of trying to, scrape data from the city servers, or doing mergers and joins and giant SQL tables to collate that data into a centralized place or data set. And specifically, what CASE's Urban Poverty Center really has a really nice, robust data set is on property transactions and property characteristics. So whether or not a property's been in foreclosure, has the taxes not been paid on it, is it even currently a vacant lot? And this is really valuable for like local community organizations who are just trying to find out, well, we know anecdotally there's probably some slum landlords in the neighborhood, but are they also the ones who are not paying their taxes and don't have licenses for their rental properties? So that data is available through CASE's NST, I guess I would call it app, is how they refer to it. It's mostly a website that you could access that data to. So with property, that is pretty exciting there, so that local community development organizations can access that to, find out information about their own neighborhood and act upon it.
Well, is that unusual for a public library? Is Cleveland one of the only public libraries doing this, or are people here from other cities likely to find their libraries are also doing something similar?
So that's not currently done by the library. That's done by CASE's Urban Poverty Center. However, at the library, I think one thing that we are really unique at is historically we are considered, this was established like over 100 years ago, to be the official depository of the city of Cleveland documents. So we have a very robust history and actually a branch within our city hall, which I think is really unique across the country. And I've only been with the Cleveland Public Library for about 20 months now, but I know one thing that we're going to be slowly working towards is actually really transitioning from being historical stewards of that data on paper format into digital, so you can access historical city council legislation, for example, through an online, website. That's still in the extremely early stages, and heck, I've already been working on it for about 4 years now. But it's a slow going. But if we get more funding, it'll happen faster. But
That's a great set of resources. We're glad to see that. Seth, what do you see some of the opportunities and assets in Cleveland's big data?
Sure. I think I guess I'm wearing two hats. So as said, I work with Tri-C, so Cuyahoga Community College is the largest community college in the state of Ohio. So I'll talk a little bit about the advantages, or I guess the opportunities within education, specifically for community college, because we serve a specific population. Our average student age typically is around 28. It is 28. So really utilizing and understanding the communities that we serve and looking at the data that is aggregated. So there's 30,000 right around folks right now going to our 5 different campuses around the county. So really being able to better understand the collective aspects of this population that we serve, so that we can really meet the goal that we have as a center of excellence. And really that is a large goal. When you think about a majority of folks living in Cleveland proper do live at or below the poverty line, those are our students. So really understanding and utilizing those data sets that they provide to us as students, and aggregating that with what we know from poverty statistics from the government in order to provide better services. So what does that look like in form? It really looks like a holistic take on education, and really kind of providing the services that this student population need in order to persist through our programs. So that's one huge opportunity that we have. I think education, looking at the student data in order to provide better programs and services is a huge opportunity. And us as a really small team and as a new center of excellence for the college, that's been our, we're very data driven in our approach to how we design programs so that we are being responsive to workforce needs, but also really understanding the community we serve, like I said before. It's been a huge opportunity, and we continue to work with that approach. And then the second piece would be with the work that I do for Hack Cleveland. We do work very closely with our other organization, partners that we look at with Open Cleveland and also Digital C. But really understanding and using, to Will's point, the limited open data resources that we have here in Cleveland, but we've been able to partner with some outside organizations and kind of match that data back. But really kind of the opportunity is really making more civic engagement. I think the ability to visualize data, whether that be through maps or infographics for community members, it really helps to tell a story and helps to get folks engaged around any type of social justice issue. So, I could think of that application to things like environmental justice, economic justice, and just recently we held an event around criminal justice reform. So when you're able to kind of visualize that information and make it evident for folks, it helps them to mobilize and understand issues that face them a little bit better.
Great, thank you. Can I skip you for a moment, Dorothy, and ask Adam Brzezinski? Adam, what do you think some of the really great assets and opportunities are with big data here in this area?
Well, I guess I'm a little bit biased because I work in healthcare, and I'm probably best positioned to comment about the healthcare data. I would say Will's highlighting of the poverty center here at Case at the Mendel School is really sort of amazing. Go there and check out the NeoCanDo data resource. It's not just Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. There's data there for all of Northeast Ohio. And so I use it probably monthly at least in my own research. As far as healthcare data goes, Cleveland is relatively unique for a few reasons. so I work at Metro Health. Metro Health was the first academic safety net medical center to install Epic, and that was back in 1999. We were actually one of Epic's very first enterprise
Did it even work
customers.
then?
It was, I remember, so I started at Epic right, not just a year or two after that, and it was like, there were still folks like pushing carts around the hospital with the old paper charts to avoid having to use it then.
Yeah, I could believe that.
So that was like a real, like, there were doctors who could be seen pushing a cart of their charts for the day around the hospital because they refused to use the system. But that positions us in a relatively unique spot nationally, and I think for a few reasons. And then, so Cleveland Clinic actually 5 years later also was a sort of early adopter of Epic. So they have about almost 15 years of data now. To give you some other details about that, there are a couple of things about our care systems that are novel nationally. One is that the systems are what could be described as horizontally, vertically integrated, so the doctors all work for the care systems, which means that when you're having primary care outpatient visits, or urgent care visits, or emergency room visits, or you're seeing a specialist, or you have an inpatient hospital stay, that all of that data from all of those types of visits is captured in one information system, and that's relatively unique nationally. So between the two organizations, we cover about 70% of all of the patients in Cuyahoga County, which is a pretty large number. So to give you just in the Metro Health data alone, it's about 1.3 million unique individuals with 20 years of historical data in the system. One of my projects now is combining that data with another 2.7 million unique individuals from Cleveland Clinic to really sort of have a regional store of data. And to give you an idea of the scale of big data there, we're working on the procedures table right now in the extraction phase, and there are 1.1 billion procedures that have been conducted in the data and that are coded and recorded. That's a sort of staggering number. In the Cleveland Clinic data alone, there are about 15 billion unique data points just on those patients. One of the things we're pursuing aggressively is linking that data to data resources that are collected and stored at the Poverty Center. So, and the primary linkage is via an address or a neighborhood. So what we're able to do is, so for example, in the Metro Health data, there are 500,000 individuals that have about 2 million addresses in the system. So we can see where they lived over that 20-year period, how often they moved. But interestingly enough, we also know from data in NST at the Poverty Center which patients were evicted from their homes. So we'll be able to eventually take a look at things like, did a cancer diagnosis precede an eviction? Like, did we bankrupt someone and they ran out of money and weren't able to pay their rent and they were then evicted? Or did it happen the other way, that they were evicted and like all sorts of terrible health problems started with them? So all of those questions are really coming to the fore now in the data resources here. And it really is sort of a legacy of this chance happening that a couple of companies, or a couple of big healthcare organizations decided to take a gamble early on installing an electronic health record system.
And it's paid off, and this data is now going to be useful not only here, but nationally.
Yeah, I think that our plan is to sort of create usable resources that folks can become authenticated with. Certainly there are sharing challenges for healthcare systems because of the regulatory environment, but I think we're getting better at dealing with some of those.
Great. Dorothy, some of the assets and opportunities for big data in this area.
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm very excited about the data champions in the data ecosystem in Cleveland. So although we don't have a central repository, what I hope you see from the three panelists, that we've got a lot going on in data, and data is driving what Digital C is about to do as we look at our mission of advancing connectivity, data, and innovation for community benefit. And Glenn, the picture that you showed of that Everstream fiber network is the reason that Digital C exists, And our core mission at this point is to try to figure out how to deliver connectivity into these poor areas of Cleveland. So if you map the poverty areas of Cleveland along with the areas of Cleveland that aren't connected to the internet, if you look at the data, somewhere between 45,000 and 55,000 people in the city of Cleveland have no connection to the internet, either with a cell phone, a computer, or any other device. And the top 10 that we're in of being the least connected city in the country is wrong. But the easy part would be to go in and spread wireless mesh over the city, because we've got access to that Everstream fiber possibly to be able to do that. But the more important part is to take the data that Adam's collecting and the data that Tri-C has and the data that Will's a champion for at the library, and to bring that together to tell us, how are we going to impact people's lives with this data? And Glenn, you talked about US Ignite, and I've been in the job for about a year now. I've been on the board of Digital C and all of its predecessors for many years. And when you're around the community for more than 30 years in technology-based economic development, you may see things through a little bit different lens. But what I learned at your Smart Gigabit Cities Conference and the Connect the Cities Conference is that data's like the new bacon. Okay, everybody wants it, everybody's excited about it, everybody wants a piece of it, but you have to be careful with data, because data can drive you to do things that don't make the community impact that you want to. And as Glenn and I were talking yesterday, we could give access to everybody in the city to either wireless or even fiber technology, but if all it does is it allows them to download Netflix or not get their kids to be able to do their homework, or not be able to access a job, not teach them how to access a job on the internet, or not take the data that Adam says that we've got health disparities in this city that are criminal for the healthcare institutions that we have that are some of the best in the world. These health disparities have to be addressed. So how can we use technology and connectivity to take care of that? Or how can we use technology and connectivity to help people get out of these poor areas? People don't want to be poor. People don't want to be homeless. So we have to make sure that when we use the data, we use it to drive the community benefit and impact that we want.
Seth, you have some of those same ideas, right? You're also collaborating on some of these same ideas?
Correct.
Can you kind of help explain?
Yeah, I mean, to Dorothy's point, we've been working quite quite a long time. Those of themselves who are like myself that consider ourselves advocates, data itself is agnostic, so we're kind of really looking at, through the work that I do with Hack Cleveland, really engaging technologists and really letting them know that in their everyday roles, whether you're a data scientist, a software engineer, for example, your biases that you have on a personal level can be built into your code. It can be built into your dashboards. It can be built into the algorithms that you're writing. So to be really cognizant of those biases that exist, so that we're not replicating the disparities and inequities that we see around us in the city into the solutions that we hope to implement. So one example of that would just be, the data used for redlining. Again, if you map the communities that do not have access to high-speed internet, you look at historical data maps, those actually line up pretty much perfectly for those communities that were redlined and received and were divested from. There's lots of reasons behind that, but again, the folks that designed the redlining, which essentially allowed people to live, people of communities of color not to be able to purchase housings in certain communities. It's all algorithmic. It's all by design. So essentially, just kind of being aware of that, allowing people to know that our jobs, whether they be in tech again or data, that there's danger and risk of replicating those biases into the solutions that we want to make our communities better. And in order to do that, we need to be aware of that.
Seth, one of the things that Dorothy's organization, Digital C, is all about is digital inclusion. And she's actually has an office and is working in the Huff neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And what are the most important needs in those kinds of neighborhoods? What should Digital C go first to go do? Is it about education? Is it about healthcare? Is it about helping the progressive movement? What are the things that you would go and put at the top of the list?
That's a heavy question.
Yeah, where to start?
You know, right?
I know.
You know, we work in tackling a lot of big issues, especially, I mean, obviously with the work that I do with Tri-C, you know, our mission is really helping folks to attain the education and training in order to provide a family-sustaining wage, which is around 50 grand for a single woman with 2 kids. So, I mean, you know, through, you know, community-based organizations, can we solve poverty? Honestly, I can't sit up here and say yes. But what keeps me moving and motivated in the work that I do is that we can make an impact in folks' lives so that they have a better quality of life, a better ability to participate in the workforce and provide for their families. So it's kind of one person at a time. So what would I recommend? I would recommend putting the community members first. Doing a lot of good organizing, which Digital C already does with the Tech Hive, and bringing community members in and creating an inclusive environment where they feel that they're welcomed, where they feel that their concerns can be, you know, heard. That can be through some kind of survey, but obviously that trust needs to be built first, because we do know that certain institutions that exist, there's been, you know, practices that were not equitable. So, I mean, I go back to the redlining piece, or I go back to schools and education and access. The communities of color that have been disenfranchised, there's a lack of trust between educational institutions, between, you know, government institutions. So really just being an ally in the communities, listening, and building that trust, and to really hear what the concerns are of community members, and then bringing them to the table to design the solutions that they want.
Well, you mentioned that you, some of this real estate data that you were working with and processing. Are you working together with people like Seth and Cuyahoga Community College in any of these things? How are the partnerships working from your point of view?
So I don't specifically currently work with the real estate, like, you know, data, like day in or, you know, day out. That I just gave that sort of like as an example of like one of the data sets that like that we, you know, that's like really nice and I guess available. Well, I guess I should say one way that I do make that available is Open Cleveland has a website, so you can apply for stewardship like of a vacant lot in Cleveland, because that's actually an issue here. We still have a lot of vacant lots in the city of Cleveland. So if you own an adjacent parcel to an accessible property, and we get that data right through through the NST app, or through their data source, and it automatically loads like once a week. You know, residents can apply for stewardship and then fill out the application to obtain that side lot, and it goes right to the city land bank.
So Adam, you mentioned that there could be a number of interactions between real estate, poverty, neighborhoods, and healthcare, and you mentioned the eviction issue. Did that cause an issue, or did the eviction cause the healthcare issue? What are some of the difficulties and challenges in sharing data across organizations and sectors?
You know, so I think they mirror some of the community challenges that Seth was talking about. So with trust being foremost, and so the concept of sharing is something that, particularly in healthcare, is not been done routinely historically. Healthcare institutions are competitors in a market for delivering healthcare services to people, and these days it is a vicious market. So convincing the healthcare institutions to collaborate and share among each other is challenging, and then convincing the organizations to share sort of outside the walls of the institution can be even harder. One of the real keys there that is just helping folks to understand that their perception of what the regulatory environment is might not be consistent with what the lawyers think the reality of the regulatory environment is, and that actually agreements are possible. They just take some time and sweat and deliberation, but it is possible to write agreements that share data, like huge amounts of data. I have an agreement that was just finalized, and we are sending data on 1.5 million patients to another healthcare institution, right? There are all kinds of controls and rules and processes and credentialing, and it was 12 months to make that agreement and get ink on it.
If I'm one of those 1.5 million patients, should I rest easy?
You should, yeah. I mean, there's like nothing bad can happen with that data. It is the safest thing that I know of. The other thing is that we've reached a point where we really, for most purposes, in research, we really only want to share data so we can do things like deduplicate and know, like, well, this is the same person at all of these places. So we should treat them as one person instead of 4 different people. Once we've done that, then we will typically engage in a de-identification process where we're removing that sort of information. Relative to the sort of housing real estate issue, I do have one quick anecdote from our recent work with this data that I think is useful and informs it. One of the things that we noticed recently was that, so in addition to so when somebody is homeless or doesn't have an address, the person in the care system will just type their address as homeless or shelter or some abbreviation of that. So we have a category for that, and we know who's been homeless for 20 years. But the other thing that we noticed recently is that there were about 5,000 individuals living at specific addresses in Cleveland. And why are there 5,000 people who live at this one address? Like, that seemed improbable. Like, Cleveland does not have many units that are large multi-unit apartment structures for rental. Most of the structures are 2 and 3 unit structures. So, like, you know, it seemed improbable. So we requested a historical database of the addresses of homeless shelters from United Way, who maintain that information. And we were able to index these addresses, and we identified over 10,000 individuals in the data who have been homeless. It happens to now be the largest epidemiologic clinical data set on homeless persons in the United States because of the fact that it spans 20 years and 2 institutions. So I think that some of the things are things that you discover in the data, and they're less. So you may not come to them and know them, and I think that so I think folks are eager to like bring in their new machine learning tool or their artificial intelligence tool, and I can tell you that that tool would have treated all of those individuals in our data. They would have been list-wise deleted because there was a string variable in the address field that didn't match any known address, or it would have done something silly that we don't want it to do. And so there's this very human component that needs to also be involved and really sort of zero in on those questions.
I can tell you that in Salt Lake City, the ability to go and target homeless folks and to try to get them better services first involved giving them ID cards because many of them were undocumented. And giving them an ID card, it actually doesn't matter whether they gave the right name or not. As long as that same ID card shows up at each service point, you can at least go and correlate the services and use big data to go and say, oh, okay, this kind of person is using these kinds of services, and be able to kind of coordinate care in that way. Dorothy?
One other comment on the homeless population. So Digital C has been interested in not only data literacy, which we have been working in the nonprofit sector on, but also digital literacy for the people that have not had access to connectivity. And we have a program called Restart funded by the Cleveland Foundation, and over the past 18 months we've educated 300 people targeting the reentry population, kids aging out of foster care, single heads of household, and veterans. And so all the marketing that we did, we just discovered that out of the 300 people that have taken the basic digital literacy course, 100 of them have taken it at the men's shelter at 2100 Lakeside, the biggest men's shelter in Ohio. About 400 men a night come through that facility. And having access to computers and the internet, ability to apply for services, apply for jobs, has actually changed some of the dynamic at the homeless shelter. So I think, you know, you have to think about when you're in a city like Cleveland, where we rank 2 or 3 in poverty and 2 or 3 in being unconnected. Part of the cure for poverty probably has to do with just getting people connected, not only to the technology and the internet, but connected to each other and to services and that kind of thing. So again, the data will help us, but then there's the things you have to do with it.
I think everyone on the panel is agreeing that it's really an ecosystem of data and partnerships and organizations that go and make this work. And I'd like to ask Will, really, what across this diversity of ecosystems and partners and data, what specific projects or larger trends seem especially interesting to you?
You know, personally, I guess personally to me, one of the things, you know, so we've identified, you know, all these, you know, different issues, you know, to help people not only just, you know, connectivity, you know, access to food, access to education. Another one of those is transportation as well. And, you know, Ohio, I think, is like 45th, or it's definitely in one of the like last 10 states in the country in terms of per capita funding of public transportation. You know, speaking of building up trust with organizations to obtain data, as you know, Adam mentioned, between institutions. I mean, for myself, for a couple of years, I was pestering the local transit authority to actually finally release like real-time locations of buses. They finally did after about 4 to 5 years. May 2017. They could still use a whole lot more funding as well for not just only improving their data sharing and technology capacity, but more of actually just increasing their services. So I see that sort of data set as well to improve their services, be, I guess, sort of exciting. And I know it's just like one small, you know, piece of the puzzle, because even if you make, you know, a great visualization to demonstrate like inequality or of potential opportunities to increase people's usage of the service, it may still fall on deaf ears. So that's where the whole policy part comes in.
Great. Seth, what do you think about some of the specific opportunities and initiatives that you think might be most meaningful?
Sure. I'll echo a bit of what Will was talking about with our Regional Transit Authority. As Will has mentioned, it's been, you know, we've kind of been advocates and working, and I've seen Will's growth since starting Open Cleveland and since my work with Hack Cleveland, and just really working with the city and the county in order to get access to these data sets that should be open and available. Some of the information is disparate, some of it is kind of locked within unreadable PDFs, but just being advocates for the folks in our communities that we represent and want to be able to have access to information in order to become more civically engaged. But to answer the question, I think Will's right on target with regard to the Regional Transit Authority. They are one of the public institutions in the region that has opened their data sets. It is one of the organizations where it is publicly available, so there's a lot of opportunity there. Where I think it is a great opportunity is because we know there's a Team NEO, so Northeast Ohio report that looks at different variables within communities of the county, but one of the pieces is around poverty and access to transportation. In Cleveland, in Northeast Ohio, there's a big gap between where folks live in the concentrated poverty within the city core and where the jobs are. And often the average for someone that lives in the city of Cleveland proper, in order to access their jobs, which are usually in outer ring suburbs, is a 2-hour both-way bus trip. So transportation is a big deal here. It's a big signifier of inequities that exist for folks that are trying to have jobs to provide a living wage. And transportation and access to reliable transportation is a big deal, so there's a huge opportunity there to kind of quantify that data that exists from the RTA to see how we can provide better services for folks that are trying to be able to find work. And then another piece that's just interesting to me and of the work that Max Herzog in the back is doing a lot of work with the Water Alliance. One of the biggest aspects and one of the biggest assets that we have obviously are our Great Lakes, specifically here. We're sitting on Lake Erie right now. So really looking at aspects of quantifying the data that is coming from our Great Lakes in order to look at things like environmental issues so that we can have impact around environmental justice, whether that be looking at lead levels or looking at runoff and the dangerous side effects of that as well. So I think those are two areas that we have huge opportunity, but leaning towards the transportation piece because we actually have access to that data now.
We need both of them. Dorothy, do you want to talk about some of the opportunities and in specific initiatives that might make a significant difference?
Yeah, so I'm going to first of all build on the water piece, because smart and connected water in terms of being some of the future and some of the places where we can gather data on our infrastructure, keeping our water safe and clean is really important. And we sit on 20% of the world's fresh water right outside our door, and the Lake Erie Basin within that is the best petri dish in the world. And I know that part of your talks have been on agriculture, and one of the biggest issues in Lake Erie is the harmful algal blooms in the Western Basin, and really it's the runoff from the farmland that has been exacerbating that, and cities like Toledo, once or twice a year, every few years, are thinking about having to shut down the intake to their water supply because of these harmful algal blooms. And so it's about, you know, the data, the internet of H2O, thinking about collecting data on these algal blooms. Where are they? When are they going to bloom? How do we analyze that data and figure out what the interventions should be, and including to get to the farmers upstream to have them analyze what they're using as fertilizers and how they're using it. So I think the whole area of smart and connected water and the fact that we've got this petri dish in our backyard is a huge advantage for Cleveland and our region. In addition, we've been looking at people's interest in data. We just did a data maturity survey because we spent about a year doing digital literacy training in very small cohorts of classes, maybe 7 to 10 to 12 people. And over 97 people took those out of the various nonprofit institutions. And if you know anything about Northeast Ohio, we have plenty of nonprofit institutions. We sent these data surveys out to over 600 organizations. About 250 people responded, representing 170 organizations. And what we know is that people are interested in data both at the foundation level that fund these organizations and at the nonprofit level that want to make impact, want to have good data, want to show that they're doing good work, but we don't know how to use data. We don't, so it's about the data literacy that you've been talking about. How do we get people engaged and involved in data? And what I'm seeing is people like this ecosystem that has been developed, and it's really, I have to give credit to April Urban and Taylor Henshaw, who have been running the Data Days conference. They've done it 2 times, it'll be done for a 3rd time, but gathering all the people that are looking at data and how data impacts our community has made a huge difference in how I think we view data, how we know each other, how we have opportunities to collaborate. And although, again, we haven't put one central repository around it, I think we've got some great future in data just because of this ecosystem that has been spurred, I would say, by Data Days in April and Taylor. So those are the things that excite me most, and knowing that we want to know, again, we're craving the bacon. We want to, we want to use data, we want to use it properly, and we want to use it to impact our community. And I think if we all work together and put our heads together, we're going to figure out how to do that.
So I'd like to open the conversation to everybody here. You've got, as you can tell, a really exciting, interested, invested panel in big data in this area. And if you would raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. And while we're getting a microphone to the first audience question, I want to ask Adam, so we all get health care. How is my health care in the future likely to be better because of big data?
Yeah, so I think there are many, many examples of this. And I think that they span a translational continuum. So there are basic science innovations that we're going to be able to discover simply because of sample size and power and the breadth and depth of data resources on the sort of bioinformatics side. But then on the clinical side, we're going to be able to do a better job of understanding the extent to which the things that we're doing in the clinic are actually beneficial or not for our patients in a manner that allows us to not always have to do randomized controlled trials, which are great, but our observational data resources continue to grow and are immense, and so just sort of using the data that's in front of us. And I guess one of the most exciting things for me, though, is that when that clinical data intersects with community issues and concerns. So I'll tip my hand here on a new project that we're currently developing. So one of the things with these large data sources that we'll be able to do is, especially when the data are integrated and shared across systems and with non-healthcare organizations, is to be able to do community epidemiologic surveillance and sort of hyperlocal public health using those resources. So right now, the CDC can tell you what percentage of people in a census tract have high blood pressure, and they do that based upon a survey of maybe 50 people who lived in that neighborhood. You know, in Cleveland, we have data where we have the clinical data on 1,000 people who lived in that neighborhood, every visit they had, every blood pressure that they ever had, what blood pressure medicines they are on, whether they had a stroke, whether they had an MI. And so what that's going to enable us to do is to sort of hotspot the communities that are facing particular health concerns, and then coordinate with programs like the Community Health Worker Program at Tri-C, and really do sort of census-based outreach, which is not something that has been done in the United States. It's the leaders in this are in the developing world, who have sort of done census-based outreach and discovered, like, here are the communities that actually have a profile of high levels of a particular chronic or infectious disease, and then training community health workers to get from that community. So sampling people, all right, you live here, we'd really love you to talk to your neighbors about colon cancer screening, because there's a really high rate of colon cancer among your neighbors, and we also noticed that nobody there is getting screened. So I think the possibilities there are probably the ones that will, in the long run, have the largest impact. But it's all of that is going to be happening together. So this sort of basic science, bioinformatics, all the way to the community side.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have a question out here? Who has the microphone? Yes, over here.
Yeah, I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about, to any of the panelists, about what the follow-ups are to your efforts. And the context, I guess, of my question is that it frequently requires either a policy change or even sometimes legislative action. And how receptive is, for lack of a better term, the government, you know, both local, county, and state, into taking some of the stuff that you're doing and going, we really need to do something differently. Some of the context is, Seth was talking about the redlining. Dorothy, you were talking about the large blooms. I know the director of agriculture was just fired because he wasn't doing anything about it. And because it was, you know, some politics come into it. So that was kind of the context. I mean, just how challenging is that?
You know, I would actually suggest that now that we know who the new governor is going to be, that we think about what the next generation of the third frontier is going to look like. Because we should be thinking about data and how data should drive change, change in these issues where we use technology to better our communities. And I think that, you know, we've got the data there, and in the, you know, last iteration of the Third Frontier, there really wasn't much about connectivity or data science or
Dorothy, could you tell folks not from Ohio what Third Frontier is?
Yeah, so the Third Frontier Initiative was started back in the early 2000s, and it was really a way to try to fund technology-based initiatives that could transcend gubernatorial administrations. Thanks, Glenn. And it was also a way to take a look at the strengths of the state and the strengths of the state in research as well as in industry, and bring those together and make investments on technology bets. And of course, you would expect Ohio to do healthcare and agriculture and materials and manufacturing, because those are our strengths. But we really never did get into the whole information technology area, smart gigabit communities, smart cities, you know, all of these things that really now are on the forefront of helping us to drive economic development. So I would say, if, you know, my big plea would be, let's figure out what this next generation of Third Frontier should look like, and then it also tried to be sensitive to the regions and their needs, and obviously if you're in a region with one of the poorest cities in the country, we better try to figure out how to use technology to make that better.
Other answers to Paul's question?
I would say on a municipal level, to be honest, our mayor was just elected for, what, a fourth term, I believe it was, last year in 2017, and his administration, frankly, hasn't been very receptive, and it's frankly just a matter of, like, slowly trying to find internal champions, like internal employees there who may be like, interested in those. And over the past couple of years at Data Days, at our first one, I think we had maybe 2 or 3, city employees, and I know that more than doubled at our last one. And in fact, we were able to even get city council to chip in, I think, like $5 or $10K for a pitched competition, which was frankly pretty surprising that we were able to do that. Frankly, a lot of politics had to get involved for that. So it's going to be a long haul, frankly, and it's, I think, slowly just trying to demonstrate the value of, open data and web technology with, small bite-sized projects that would, slowly chip away and, show that efficacy. Because other than that, if you have other suggestions, I'm all ears.
Go, Adam.
I would just add to what Will said. So I think that historically it's been very challenging to get governments in Northeast Ohio, regardless of which one you would point at, to share data. Another challenge in Northeast Ohio is just that we have a fragmented municipal infrastructure. I think we have sort of 52
as does most everybody,
urban areas, but even more fragmented than other areas. So the city's core is small relative to the large core of heavily populated suburban areas. And so that makes it even more challenging, because point-to-point communication with each of those different municipal administrations is very challenging. Digital C has a history of doing a great job of that. So I think there are models for doing a good job. I would highlight one project that Digital C is involved in that is where the city is being an awesome steward of data and is now sharing it. It's a project run by a local nonprofit, Environmental Health Watch, and it's also in partnership with the Mandel School here at Case. And the project is sharing data in an unprecedented manner, really, from proactive rental inspections that the city is doing, from the Building and Housing Department, and from the City of Cleveland Department of Public Health. And the goal there is to create a community resident-facing and healthcare provider-facing tool that allows folks who are shopping for housing to understand the health risks associated with a particular property or unit that they would consider purchasing or renting, so that they'll be able to see the profile of, like, well, has a child been lead poisoned in this place before? Is the landlord in court for having had a series of violations? Has the landlord had their driver's license suspended by an order of the court because they failed to comply with violations in building and housing? So these are awesome things that the city is doing, but I would say it's been a long and very challenging process to get those agreements in place that allow us to sort of put a sharing layer on top of the data, because it's not just the data, it's also like a layer that shares it in a manner that is honest and not, we certainly don't want to like indict a good landlord with data like that. And the councilmen need to know that their constituents who are landlords are not going to be like knocking on their door and ringing their phone saying like, why are you doing this to me? Right? We absolutely can't have that.
Right.
Paul, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I want one more comment, though, if I could, Glenn, on the city and the county. So, again, having been around technology for a long time in this community, in this state, there's a moment in time for all of these technologies. And I think data's moment in time has come. And I also think that, Mayor Jackson, who hasn't been at the forefront of smart and connected cities or this kind of technology, has had many other things to deal with, but when you realize how data and technology can help you drive good things, I know that we've got city council people coming through that are very, very supportive of data and connectivity. The mayor of that Tech Hive facility, if you haven't been there, to 6815 Euclid, please come down, spend an hour or a day, or rent a desk for months at a time. We'd love to have you in there to be part of our diverse community, but the city put a third of the financing into that facility to have a technology hub in the middle of its poorest neighborhoods, Huff, Fairfax, Glenville, and Central. So I think the time for technology and data has come, and the good news is is that this data ecosystem bubbling up from the bottom is alive and well, as you can see. And when Max and I put the panel together and called April and Taylor to say who could be on it, there were a dozen people that could have been on this panel and done some terrific talks. And so don't lose faith in our government yet. We, both at the city and the county and the state level, I think we can make huge impacts. The last bond issue for the Third Frontier Ballot Initiative was $760 million. And I was there working on it and helping to pass it, so hopefully we'll get one that helps us with this as well.
I'm going to ask the panel to make a one-sentence optimistic projection about the future. But before I do that, is there a last question here from the audience?
I have one quick question.
Yes.
And if we don't have time to answer it now, I'd love to hear from you later. So, is there already a place for people to go to learn from your experiences? Are there some one-pagers drafted around best practices that could help other NGOs, other communities do some of the same kinds of work? And if that's not gathered and collected, how can the big data hubs help to provide that resource?
How can the big data hubs help?
I'll start. So for the work that I do with Hack Cleveland, and kind of to talk to the policy piece just real quickly, it's just the answer is how do you affect change? You just keep building more advocates for the people. We're not going anywhere. Hack Cleveland is called Hack Cleveland not just from a technical sense, but just because we're looking at hacking systems. We're looking at changing and removing the old guard and really injecting it with technology and data for the people, by the people, in order to impact, progressive, positive change for our communities. So what could be helpful? Hack Cleveland, we do hold different events. We just held a scope-a-thon that was looking at bringing community members to the table along with technologists to scope out sustainable solutions to issues around criminal justice reform, really looking at bail reform. As data scientists, as a data hub, looking at having access to those data sets for the technologists that are working on developing those solutions is incredibly helpful. So whether that be around issues related to, again, environmental justice or economic justice or access to jobs, just knowing that organizations like Hack Cleveland exist and we're really kind of working in that space to affect change for our communities, in that we're not going anywhere because it's a central issue for our communities. I hope that answered the question. I know there's a second piece, but I just blanked.
Any other comments on how the big data hubs could help in your issues?
Well, I would say we're flying this plane while we're building it, so we don't have the white papers yet at this point on what we're experiencing and what we're doing, but come back in a year or two and maybe we can start that, and we'd love to work with the big data hubs and figure out how to help us, because we're not, we're obviously not going to create our own big data hubs. We certainly have NeoCanDo and the Urban Poverty Center. We've got the city data, we've got county data, we've got data at the universities, and somehow we're going to have to bring that all together for good, but we haven't written the papers yet.
That was the one piece I had forgot. So for the event and really kind of helping folks to understand, why does social justice tech matter? How does it impact you? We do develop guides for technologists that may not come from an advocacy background to kind of learn more about these issues and how they can be involved and how they can use their skills for good. So for our last event, our toolkit, if you will, our guidebook exists at fix216.org. And there's a collection of links and resources that really frame out the issues and really frame out, how technologists, how data scientists, how technical folks that may not be impacted by issues, although we all are impacted in one way or another, how they can get involved and how they can use their skills, again, for just causes.
Great. Well, I'd like to ask the panel the one last question, and that is, do you have a one-sentence prediction, hopefully an optimistic one, about the future and big data? Will?
Prediction-wise, really that city budgets, and hopefully maybe this is more optimistic, that the transparency of city budgets will become much more of a bigger talking point, like in municipal elections, thanks to open data in upcoming years.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Seth?
Sure. I think Cleveland as a hub for healthcare, really kind of hanging our hats on that as far as healthcare and research are concerned, so that we can look at some of these health disparities that exist within our communities is kind of...
One sentence.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. So using this healthcare data that we have at Aggregate to create equity for our communities. It's a shame that we have these healthcare institutions here and we have such great inequities in health.
Excellent. Thank you. Dorothy, one sentence.
I believe the big data will help us create equitable opportunity in the digital economy, so come back to Cleveland and see where we go with that.
Adam?
I would just say the more that we share, so not just within Cleveland, but sort of beyond, the healthier our communities will be.
Great. Well, I'd like to ask you to thank all the panelists. While Melissa is making her way here for some closing comments, I wanted to make some of my own closing comments. Melissa said I could do that. I think that what we've heard is that we are early in a real movement and revolution. And if I had my own one sentence is, I think that big data is poised for making a big difference. I think big data is poised for making a big difference. And I think we see that in the emphasis we've heard here on the panel on education, on awareness, on transparency, on resources, and about really taking advantage of what we have at this stage and taking it to the next stage. And I think that we did hear a lot of optimistic work in taking that forward. And in terms of, you had asked your question, Melissa, about, where could we go to find all of this? And the answer is on a panel like this. And so I would suggest an answer to your question is one of the things the big data hubs can really do is to continue to convene panels, workshops like this, because we need these waypoints to be able to mark our progress and chart our course.
Thank you. Thanks, Glenn. I want to thank the panel again. Thank you for your time today. It's also really important for us in academia to hear what's happening outside in NGOs and other kinds of organizations, so we can help also build partnerships, help give students opportunities, or at least knowledge of job pathways that exist, and also think about how we drive our research and our data science education to help solve some of the problems that are out in the world. How do we make sure that we're getting trained people out outside of industry, outside of sort of general pathways that we hear about the tech companies, and working on problems more broadly across the U.S. So thank you very much again. That brings our program to a close. I'd like to just take a moment to thank our sponsoring organizations again. So the Case Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, Case Department of Material Science and Engineering, and the School of Engineering, Case Great Lakes Energy Institute, the Solar Durability and Lifetime Extension Research Center, and the University Technology Center. Finally, the National Supercomputing Center for Applications. So thank you all again for coming. We will have the videos from our conference up online in just a few days, and we hope to see you next year. Thank you.
Good job, Adam.